Hi, everybody. Welcome to Reader's Intrigue, where authors are going to read the first chapter of their book so that we can be intrigued and maybe find a new book to read. Get comfy, get cozy. Let's listen.
How many big mistakes can you make and still end up with an amazing life? Quite a lot, it turns out, especially if the goddess has your back. Hi, my name is Lorraine Segal, and that's the first line of the description of my memoir, Angels and Earthworms, An Unexpected Journey to Joy, Love, and Miracles. And, introducing myself and introducing the memoir are almost the same because it's about my life. I started out as a miserable child and ended up with a really beautiful life. And I felt this call to write about it and share what I had learned and hopefully inspire other people that you don't have to start your life in a good place to end up having true love and beauty and right livelihood. So let me read you a little more about the description of the book. Lorraine Segal, that's me, of course, is a misfit little Jewish girl growing up in a conservative Christian community, smart, funny, fierce, and utterly miserable. But a loving goddess shows up just in time. With persistence and humor, Lorraine learns to embrace her mistakes and herself, and moving from desolation to miracles. Along the way, she accidentally yet actively participates in major cultural movements of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, including the Berkeley Peace Movement, radical feminism, gay rights, the AIDS crisis, 12-step addiction recovery, and bonus adventures in teaching English as a second language, lesbian ballroom dancing, and surviving mobbing in toxic academia. Through stories both poignant and hilarious, Lorraine shares her progress from the cramped confinement of her 1950s childhood all the way to her rich, layered life today as a happily married lesbian, conflict transformation expert, and writer. And I had a lot of fun writing this memoir. Parts of it were hard, but it was also a beautiful process that taught me a lot about myself and my life and made me realize that all the things I thought were dead ends and mistakes really had been leading me on a path to a good life. And I wanted to inspire others with that you could do that too. So, let me start reading from chapter 1, which is about my childhood. And chapter 1 is called Welcome to Downey, Future Unlimited. When you entered the town of Downey in the 1950s, you saw a sign shaped like a futuristic lozenge that read, Welcome to Downey, Future Unlimited. This was a bit of a joke even back then, because Downey was mostly a series of strip malls, parking lots, and tract homes. In this part of the greater Los Angeles area, Pico Rivera, Bellflower, Lakewood, Inglewood, Bell Gardens, Glendale, Norwalk, Paramount, and Downey were all only freeway exits off the Santa Ana Freeway, and later the Interstate 405, with no unoccupied land in between. There really was no space for an expansive future. Downey had few claims to fame. The third McDonald's restaurant in the world, a drive-in, opened on August 18th, 1953 in Downey at Lakewood Boulevard and Florence Avenue. I remember as a very little girl getting takeout food there. And Downey had an office of the John Birch Society, the notorious ultra-conservative organization filled with wild conspiracy theories that predated the Tea Party movement and QAnon. The only time I ever heard Downey mentioned on the TV was an ad for Bob Spreen Cadillac that played over and over. Their slogan was, "Where the freeways meet, in Downey." When I was very little, the narrow thinking and extremely conservative politics and religious views didn't impact my life in any direct way. My family and my home and backyard were my whole life. I wasn't athletic, but I loved to be outside. I made up endless outdoor games and fantasies, joined my sister when she was old enough. Play involved running around, making lots of noise, gathering endless piles of leaves under the constantly shedding Brazilian pepper tree, digging holes to find buried treasure, or later burying treasures for a time capsule or for explorers to find, as well as picking flowers. We weren't allowed to pick the lovely purple geranium flowers, but we could pick as many small white flowers from the jade green succulents that lined one side of the driveway as we wanted. There was also an incinerator out in back of the garage, which I found mysterious and interesting. My only bad experience in the backyard was once stepping on a trail of big red fire ants. Their bites were like red-hot pokers on the bottom of my bare feet. As we grew older, my world expanded to include our block, and I have some sweet memories of playing with the neighborhood children our ages. Judy and Dee Dee lived across the street and had an apricot tree in their backyard. They were in charge of when and how many we could eat, but they did share. Not all the children were friendly. Mike, who lived down the street, was a bully, the same age as me. I never knew how to deal with him very well, but one day he started taunting and pushing my sister. I was too furious to be afraid. I got right in his face and told him, "You leave my little sister alone." He tried to hit me, and instead of running away, I hit him back and grappled with him a little as we both fell down. He was scared and startled, a coward like most bullies, and stood up and ran away. He never bothered either of us again. Growing up in Downey and later in the San Fernando Valley in the 50s and 60s, the smog was horrific, but no one talked about the health dangers. When I was little, the smog was so thick that you could see it. I remember multiple times coming home from school with my chest and lungs aching and burning so painfully from the smog that I had to lie down. Between that and my father's smoking, it's no wonder that my lungs were vulnerable. I heard a story, probably apocryphal, about the body of a woman being found in a canyon in LA. She had no ID, but they knew she wasn't a native Southern Californian because when they did an autopsy to find cause of death, her lung tissue was far too pink for her to have been there very long. I remember being diapered as a young child, probably two, and using a step stool to climb up into my crib. It's odd to have such a vivid memory as an adult. And I remember when I was 3 years old and my little sister was born. My Aunt Rose had come to stay, and we stopped to buy flowers, red tulips, I think, although I didn't know that name then, to bring to the hospital to my mom. My aunt wasn't happy about it, but I insisted that she buy a yellow tulip, so I had my own distinct flower to give to my mother. Then I held my little sister on a pillow. I wasn't always the best sister. She was always following me around, and I found it tiresome, even though she adored me. But we did make up many games to play together indoors as well as outside. We both loved the Chronicles of Narnia and started having shared dreams in which we went through the wardrobe and had our own adventures. I usually woke up earlier in the dream than she did, so we had a daily debrief for a while. I would start telling what I remembered from the dream, and she would tell me what happened after I left. I also had my own small magic alternative world that I dreamed about. Our house in Downey had an old-fashioned metal furnace with a triangular angled grate that put out heat in both the living room and in the hall right outside my bedroom. You could kind of see into the space between, and it was odd looking. I had dreams that talking animals, a fox and a cat, lived down there, and I could magically go down and play with them. I remember a slide was involved. Cowboys and other heroes of my childhood. I had my own child perceptions of what my family and Downey and 1950s culture, including TV, were like. TV was a significant influence on my childhood. In the 1950s, TV was so different from the shows they have on now. There were only a few channels, and the dominant genre was cowboy stories. I remember watching The Rifleman, Rawhide, Have Gun Will Travel, Gunsmoke, Maverick, and Bonanza. I had a crush on Joe on Bonanza. I still remember the theme songs of many of these shows. Some of them I memorized without understanding the meaning of all the words. A knight without armor in a savage land. Paladin, paladin, where do you roam? In all of these shows, the cowboys were the heroes. Sometimes clever, sometimes simply brave. I knew nothing about Indigenous people then. A favorite game when I was very little was Cowboys and Indians. I had a precious possession, a toy cowboy pistol with an ivory, i.e., ivory plastic handle. One time we were strategizing how to ambush the other team, and I suggested something I'd seen on TV. We could hit them over the head with the butt of the gun, I said. A child who was a couple of years older than me said, "No way, that could really hurt him." I was bewildered and said, "Really?" There didn't seem to be any consequence to doing that on the TV show, but I accepted his word for it. I was too little to really understand the difference between TV and real life. Two of my other favorite shows were Robin Hood and Zorro. I was very taken with Robin Hood and his merry band of men, along with Maid Marian and the life they lived in the woods. It seemed like they had a good altruistic purpose and a lot of fun. But I think Zorro was my absolute favorite. There was something about his double identity and the dashing figure he cut, with his sword, his mask, and his cape rippling in the wind as he rode his beautiful stallion. He completely captured my imagination. My sister and I made up our own stories with adventures involving Zorro. We had plastic toy horses. I had a palomino and she a black stallion. And we had little dolls with bendable joints that could ride on the horses. We used those for our Zorro stories. My sister was an adventurer with Zorro, while I assumed all the pretty girl roles, as we called the love interests. I always loved pretty clothes and femme stuff. I also loved Superman. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Superman. I imagined that I had a ballet tutu and that I could fly with him, combining two of my favorite fantasies, being a ballerina and flying. My favorite cartoon show when I was very young was Mighty Mouse. Here he comes to save the day. I loved the idea that this tiny being had superpowers and was more powerful than the bigger people around him. In all these shows, men were the heroes and women secondary, and action was the path to courage. There was nothing about inner journeys or transformation. A bit later, Sherry Lewis, the puppeteer and ventriloquist, came along, and I absolutely adored one of her puppets, Lamb Chop. Mr. Rogers was after my time, but we had Romper Room, and in my part of Southern California, Sheriff John, who was a pretty benevolent figure. I loved the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, although I didn't get all of their sly, subversive humor. Although we usually ate at home, occasionally we did go out to eat. My favorite restaurant was a German one. I enjoyed the food: roast beef in a sweet sauce with raisins, hot potato salad, and a sweet baked bean side dish. But my favorite part was that the walls of the restaurant were covered in cuckoo clocks. I lived for the moment when the little cuckoo birds would come out on the hour and say, cuckoo, cuckoo. The restaurant also sold very well-made animal puppets and toy stuffed animals. Every once in a while, my parents let us choose a hand puppet. We had a cat, a little dog, and an owl. My sister and I had hours of fun playing with them. Once, for a school project, my father helped me build a little set, and I used the cat puppet and the owl puppet to do a dramatic hand puppet rendition of the poem, The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Lear. The Romance of the Silver Surfboard. In 6th grade, romance entered my child world. Blonde surfer Neil and red-haired freckled Carol Sue were two popular cool kids in the school. Neil asked Carol Sue to go steady and gave her a small silver surfboard on a chain to signify their love. This was a scandal, and kids and adults took sides. Carol Sue would walk around the playground linking arms with another of other girls who championed her. But adults were concerned that they were too young, and some kids found it shocking too. I was on the outside anyway and didn't quite get what the fuss was all about. Later that year, another student, Larry, invited me to go on a date with him to the school carnival. I bluntly said no, because I was already going with Lois. Poor Larry. It didn't even occur to me that I might have hurt his feelings. The Beatles also entered my consciousness at this time. One girl brought fan cards with pictures of them. Their hair looked so long and wild and odd. We had never seen anything like it. The boys we knew were still getting crew cuts or daringly long hair slicked back with one piece falling in their eyes like Neil. When I look at early Beatle pictures now, they look clean cut and mainstream, but they were rebels for sure back then. Childhood difficulties and traumas. Except for the images and ideas that I found in fantasy books, my childhood was completely devoid of spirit. I felt lost at times, though I didn't know what was missing or why I didn't fit in at school. But I paid attention to what was happening around me, which helped me reframe and forgive later. The elements of political awareness and an awareness of injustice, of wanting to lift up the world, to help myself and others, all started in childhood. My parents, Henry and Fran, loved me as deeply, as much as, and in the ways they knew how. They wanted to be good parents. They put time and energy and money and intention into it. The fact that they did it with mixed success, despite all their efforts, and gave me a lot of miserable messages about myself and how to live, wasn't because of malice, but because they had appalling gaps in their own knowledge about life, in their own ability to love themselves, and others, and in how to connect with source. Well, that isn't the whole of chapter 1. There's some more, but that's as much as I have time for. This was from chapter 1 of Angels and Earthworms, An Unexpected Journey to Joy, Love, and Miracles. You can find the book everywhere. It's on Amazon as an ebook and paperback. It's also available through independent bookstores. You can order it from and support your local independent bookstore. And if you go to my website, I have a list of all the clickable links of places you can order the book. My website is conflictremedy.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter that you can find on that page, you'll get information about special offers. And also, I will immediately send you 2 beautiful forgiveness prayers. And you can learn more about me and my cartoon muse, whose name is Bookie, and how I wrote the book. I would love to have you sign up and interact with me. And please buy the book and read it. And if you like it, write reviews. You can find it at all the information at conflictremedy.com/book. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. It was really fun to read chapter 1 out loud. I've never done that before. And I wish you to find your own miracles, and please include my book in that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you again to the amazing author that read us a story. And be sure to check out all the other amazing shows on RB Media. Till next time. Bye.